I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. Today on Hard Knocks, we have Rick Steves, the acclaimed travel writer and television host. His latest memoir is called On the Hippie Trail, Istanbul to Kathmandu and the Making of a Travel Writer. It's about his formative 1978 journey that influenced his lifelong advocacy and interest in cultural immersion and open-minded travel. So this was a really fun conversation because obviously he has had a lot of great travel experiences, and I have had less nice ones. So we talk about what it means to travel through not just the world, but through life, how to have different kinds of ideas of how to navigate the challenges and opportunities of travel and life. So, what is an abundant versus scarcity mindset? What does it mean to think communally versus individually? How to be, what is more important, generosity or greed, affinity and fear? How does that impact how we encounter life both personally and socially and politically? Rick has some very strong political feelings, and we get into that. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Hard Knocks. I'm so excited to talk to you. You're this acclaimed travel writer who has a big heart and an open mind and all these great experiences. And I am super interested to talk to you because of all of my traumatic experiences. Yeah, thank you. Well, so first of all, I know that you are a huge, proponent for travel. And I think a lot of people would be surprised that I am as well. That, even today, someone asked me, given everything that I've experienced, studying abroad, one of my roommates being murdered, going to prison for that murder, even though I didn't commit it, would I recommend studying abroad to any young person who could have been me or could have been my roommate? And my answer is very definitively yes, in the sense that I think that travel and especially study abroad are these hugely impactful, moments of personal growth and interconnection, these huge opportunities for cultural exchange that are so important for having a good understanding, being just a good global citizen. And that's in spite of all of the bad things that I've experienced. I also like to recognize that the vast majority of people's travel experiences are positive compared to what I went through. But honestly, I feel like you would be more of an expert in that than I would be, because my travel experiences were of a very different flavor and were limited in that way. So I'm curious to know if you could talk to me about, from your own experience, why is travel such a catalyst for personal growth?
Well, first of all, what happened to you happens to people anywhere. I mean, statistically, it's more likely to happen to you here in this country than overseas. And you can take an incident and say, oh, that's terrible. Well, yeah, that's terrible. But you can forget that, and I know statistics are optional these days in our country, but if you really want to be safe, and you look at the statistics, you're safer by leaving this country than staying home in it. So if you love your kids, you'll take them to Italy tomorrow. Not that something bad can't happen, as you've proven. But bad things happen all the time in the United States, but they're just a little more newsworthy maybe when they happen overseas. So, and I think if you really care about a safe and stable world, the more we travel, the more understanding we have, and the more we realize we're all in this together. So, travel is a force for people living peaceably together and coexisting if we disagree. That's one thing I really like about travel. But ask me the question again. What was the question?
From your personal experience, how is travel a catalyst for personal growth?
Travel is personal growth if you let it be. That's my mission as a teacher, is not just to be fun in the sun. I like fun in the sun. I like time on the beach. But you can be a traveler, you can be a tourist, you can be a traveler, and you can be a pilgrim. You can see the world as a playground. You can see the world as school, or you can see the world as church. You can see the road as church, the road as mosque, or the road as synagogue. And I don't think you need to be a bon vivant, or I don't think you need to be a monk. I think you can mix it all together. That's the beautiful thing. And when you mix it all together, what you're trying to do is make travel be transformational. You've probably heard that in your foreign study programs and so on. That's what people like.
It was for me.
Well, it was for you, for sure, yeah. Well, people want transformational in a good way. And I think thoughtful travel lets you bring home the most beautiful souvenir, and that's a broader perspective. And conversely, sloppy travel, lost opportunity travel, you don't bring home a broader perspective. You've just accentuated how we might be isolated and not in sync with the world. So I love how you can, when you leave your home, and you can also often learn about it by looking at it from a distance. I learn a lot about the world when I travel, but I also learn a lot about my home when I leave it and look at it from a distance. And you gain all of this, these new dimensions of appreciating this world when you travel. And that in itself is transformational. I always throw on this quote from Muhammad 1,400 years ago. He said, "Don't tell me how educated you are, tell me how much you've traveled." And for me in my work, Europe is my focus, and my mission at Rick Steves Europe is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. That's really what I want people to do. For a lot of people, they think they're traveling, and they go to Orlando, then they go to Vegas, then they go to Cancun, and they go back to Orlando, and then they try Disneyland, and then they go back to Vegas. And then they go to Mazatlan. And that's vacation. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a lost opportunity if you value travel. And all I want to do is encourage that person to try Portugal. You know, it's a different language. It's old. Everything doesn't work as well as it does in the United States, maybe. But you might realize, wow, this world's an interesting place, and it can be my playground. It can be my school, and it can be my church. It's a beautiful thing. So I like to open the door to the value of travel, to be a transformational experience, and it certainly has for me.
What mindset should someone have? Like, what sort of qualities prepare someone to get the most out of their travel experience? Because, what I've found, or at least, again, like when I was just recently asked this question, would I recommend studying abroad to someone? One of the things that I mentioned was intentionality, like the idea that you're it's not just going off and who knows what you might want to get out of it, but like really thinking, I want to get something out of this, and asking yourself ahead of time, what values am I wanting to carry with me into this experience? What sort of things am I looking for out of this experience? And also being open to the possibility of surprises and having an openness to experience, but also having an intentionality. And I wonder if that's in part a way to express that, maybe one of the qualities that allows you to be nimble and adaptive to these open experiences that you might have might be a sense of gratitude, even for the opportunity, versus like entitlement. Like, what are these qualities in a human being that can prepare them to get the most out of their travel experience and have a good trip as opposed to a bad one?
I would say an attitude that sees culture shock as not something to avoid, but culture shock is a positive thing. It's constructive. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. A lot of people work very hard to have no culture shock. That's their goal, is please protect me from culture shock. And that's just the opposite of me as a travel teacher. I want to curate the culture shock. I'm a tour guide. We take 30,000 people on our tours every year. I work very hard with my guides to curate culture shock, not to protect people from this, to let Americans understand that we are not the norm. People who sit on a toilet are not the norm on this planet. People who put
I love that example. Just that specific.
Yeah, well, people who use metal utensils to shovel food into their mouth are not the norm on this planet. And some people may find that stressful or invasive, but buck up. You're going to go out there and realize that, escargot is tasty. Everybody has to have an escargot, a slug, And if you don't like it, good. You tried it. You tried it in the right place. You tried the best escargot in the world. You don't like it, fine. But you may go home with a little broader perspective. So you need to have a positive attitude about culture shock. You need to celebrate serendipity. If you get everything figured out too carefully in advance, you shut the door on serendipity. And a good traveler exposes themselves to serendipity, travels in a way where you encounter serendipity. And when serendipity knocks, you say, come on in. I don't even care how tired you are. I don't care what else you got scheduled. Sometimes you just got to go with the flow and you realize that wasn't planned, but those are the magic moments you take home. And you mentioned gratitude, Amanda. I think you travel with a feeling of gratitude. I just find myself saying, I just blurt out like a little baby yelps. I just go, life is good when I'm on the road. And I just love that. I could be in Poland. I could be in Morocco. I could be in Japan. I could be in Dublin. And I just think, whoa, life is good. And the flip side of that coin is, oh, my poor American friends who don't have passports and their whole worldview is shaped by commercial TV news and surrounding themselves with people who are the same ethnicity and the same religion and the same cultural baggage. And they just live in one sorry, boring echo chamber. And that's your choice. You can live that way, and a lot of people do. And other people, they raise the bar a little bit on what they're going to get out of life and what they're going to give at the same time. And that's why I just think travel for me it's just time and money well spent if you are privileged and able to get out there and enjoy the world.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of is an interesting, it seems so obvious to me, that very clearly going out and, testing your boundaries and trying new things and meeting new people would be a positive thing for any human being. But then there's like the flip side of the question, which is, why do we need to go anywhere to have a good life? And I'm curious to know if you feel like travel is a necessary thing to live a good life, or is there just something about the travel mindset, like that embrace of serendipity that one can have in their life, even if they are unwilling or unable to travel?
Well, part of it for me is traveling in a way that makes me a citizen of the planet. It gives me, I go home with a dual citizenship, a keener appreciation of what it is to be an American, and an enthusiastic realization that I've got a global citizenship. And when I become this strange kind of voter who, when I step into the voting booth, I don't ask myself, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago? I understand that who wins this election is going to impact people south of the border far more than it's going to impact me. And as a caring person, as a person of faith who really takes love thy neighbor seriously, I vote for what's best for the world, what's best for the environment, and what's best for struggling people who may never see their name on a plane ticket. And that's a consequence of travel. Had I never traveled, I could, like a lot of people, step into a voting booth and vote simply for me. And I think that's boring. And I think that's not very admirable. And it's certainly not in keeping with the faith of anybody who believes in this silliness of love thy neighbor, which is what I believe Jesus said.
That's a really good point. And it's something I actually wanted to talk to you about. I mean, we began this discussion with, you getting a call about trying to get funding back in schools for art and music. I'm curious, how have your travels informed your advocacy for certain causes? I know that you advocate for drug policy reform, for climate change mitigation, and for housing for the homeless. Like, how were you drawn to these causes as a result of your travel experiences?
Well, I always believe that if people had to travel before they could vote, we'd have a much stronger nation and we'd be much better off and we wouldn't be in the pickle we're in right now. I know that's not realistic and it's not true to the idea of everybody votes the same and so on. But if that was a prerequisite for voting, we'd certainly have a different political landscape. But anybody that wants to derail our democracy is relying on people who have no passports, whose worldview is shaped by fear-mongering commercial TV news, and who really wants to build bridges instead of building, or who really wants to build walls instead of bridges. I really find that one of my beautiful souvenirs is an appreciation that if you want to be safe, you don't build walls, you build bridges, because that connects us. I just treasure that. To me, it's really valuable. Amanda, can you review me the question one more time? Because I think I have something more to say. What was the question?
Oh, I was just asking about how your travels haven't informed your, advocacy for certain causes, and we can get even into specific ones. Like, I think it's pretty clear how climate change mitigation is informed by travel. You've seen firsthand how people who have been more or less experiencing the consequences of climate change, and how people have more or less responsibility in that regard. Housing for the homeless, I think, similarly. Like, you've been places where people have very different lifestyles and also very different wealth. And so you can come home and have an appreciation for how our wealth is distributed. I'm curious, how is your advocacy informed? Like, how is your advocacy for drug policy reform informed by travel?
Well, first of all, when you travel, you get a much better idea of what are possibilities? What are other nations doing who are confronted by the same challenges? It's complicated. And you get to enjoy making a difference by employing the sensibilities you picked up on the road. It could be a keener appreciation for the fragility of our environment and the importance of taking care of it. And you learn that on the road. It could be a recognition that for most societies, healthcare is considered a basic right, and people don't live with the tyranny of I hope I don't get a medical emergency that impoverishes me. That people deserve to work all their lives, and if they do, they should have a dignified retirement. In my particular world, I'm all about avoiding travel. I've got these budget tricks. You go to Europe, how are you going to afford a roof over your head? And how are you going to feed yourself? Well, it is interesting to me that that's my business work. That's what I produce, is content that helps people travel in an affordable way, get good housing, get good food. And then two big passions of mine are affordable housing and fighting hunger when I get home. I don't think that's just random. I think it's related. Civil liberties. I travel in countries where they have a lot of civil liberties. There's a little town where Salvador Dali was born in Spain, where they've got the Statue of Liberty, but it's got two arms sticking up in the air instead of one. And they like their civil liberties also. I go into countries that don't know what mass incarceration is, and they don't, and they really live with a passion for pragmatic harm reduction rather than legislating morality. That's a fundamental different approach to life, and I learned that in Europe. And getting back to drug policy reform that you mentioned, for me, it's a passion for civil liberties. It's a passion for addressing a racist problem, and it's a practical solution to something that's going to happen whether we like it or not. You can't wish marijuana away. Just because you don't like the smell of marijuana, you can't criminalize it and make that smell go away. You've got to decide, how are we going to do that? And Europe has the same challenges that we do in that regard, and they don't lock people up. And when they realize that they've got a serious hard drug abuse problem, a serious opioid problem, a serious overdose death problem, what they do, and two countries that had the worst problem were Portugal and the Netherlands, and both those countries were innovative leaders in decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana. They take marijuana out of the equation and then focus their law enforcement resources on the serious problem, which is hard drug abuse, which we're losing more people today than we lost in the Vietnam War. Nobody died from marijuana, but tens of thousands of people are dying from opioid problems. Well, the Dutch and the Portuguese legalized marijuana essentially, and now they focus on hard drug addiction, and they lose a tiny percent of what we lose per capita because they are dealing with this drug abuse problem smartly and pragmatically. So I took that pragmatic approach to drugs. I took it home from Europe, and I was a co-sponsor and a leading funder and spokesperson for the law in Washington State back in 2012, which along with Colorado, we were the first state in the country to actually legalize the responsible adult use of marijuana. My stance was not marijuana is good. My stance was it's a drug. It can be abused. It should be regulated, but it's here whether we like it or not, and it makes more sense to get rid of the black market and highly tax and highly regulate it and recognize it as a civil liberty for Americans. And in my talks, I would everywhere I went around, and I've been all over the country with this crusade of let's take down the prohibition against marijuana in the United States of America. I'll tell people I'm a hardworking, tax-paying, kid-raising, church-going American citizen. And if I work hard all day long and want to go home and smoke a joint and just stare at the fireplace for 3 hours, that is my civil liberty. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. I'm saying it's my civil liberty. It's a principled stance as an American that this is a civil liberty. Can I drive while intoxicated by anything? No, throw the book at me, Can I, sell it to minors? Of course not. Throw the book at me. But in the privacy of my own home, can I do this just because it's fun? And as a matter of principle, if you believe in the civil liberties and the whole thing about what America is all about, the answer is yes. So what I like to do is not just take the easiest cause. Anybody can support, I won't name the causes, but obvious causes that are not controversial. I like to embrace causes that I can just blame my European friends for this sensibility and be outspoken in this country when other people are afraid to talk about it. So I like to talk about drug policy reform. And I can do that quite effectively because I'm not the kind of person you'd think would be pro-marijuana. And then I can explain I'm not pro-marijuana, I'm anti-prohibition and pro-civil liberties and anti-racism and da-da-da. And then people that thought they were opposed to the legalization of marijuana realize, I guess it does make sense from a pragmatic harm reduction point of view. And that's a phrase that's not allowed in our government when it comes to talking about drug policy issues, because they don't want pragmatic harm reduction. They want to legislate morality for in the interest of the status quo. But that's a whole different interview. But these are the kind of ways that travel impacts you. When I travel, I know that our national budget is a moral document, and it's supposed to represent the morals of the citizenry. So are we having a budget now that represents the morals of our citizenry? Or do we have a government that has hijacked things and represents the morals of its elites that are funding it? That's a pretty important issue. And everything that's happening now with the priorities in our budget are far from what people thought they were voting for. And I think that's a problem. And I'm tuned into it in part because I've traveled. Trump can demonize the deep state. I know what the deep state is. It's called institutions that hold a society together. And if you wonder why Scandinavia is doing so well and people are so content there and enjoying life so nicely, a big part of it is that they embrace the deep state. And they don't think of it in demonic terms as framed by some right-wing think tank, which they're so good at doing. But they see it as this is what holds our society together, these institutions. And as a traveler, I can bring home that outlook. Amanda, I like to think of myself as the modern day equivalent of the medieval jester. 1,000 years ago in Europe, the king would give the jester room and board. He'd pay that guy to be annoying, to go outside of the castle, learn what's going on in the barrio, learn the jokes people are saying about the king, and then come home and tell the king what's going on outside the walls. And as travelers, I think that's our responsibility, and I enjoy doing that because I care about our country and I care about its impact on the rest of the world.
Have you spent much time in countries where, compared to the U.S., there are fewer civil liberties, or there's more of a homogenous culture?
Fewer civil liberties, for sure. Yeah, if you, I think my most powerful travel experiences are when I've gone to countries where there are fewer civil liberties.
Can you talk to me about that?
Well, the Soviet Union back in the day, Iran, Cuba, and I get to talk to people about what their struggles are and what their challenges are. And also, I go to countries where there's beautiful civil liberties, and I get to talk about that. And it's just a cool thought that we're all in this together, and we can compare notes. And then when we lose our civil liberties, we should be aware of it. I mean, we used to be able to do that. Now we can't. In the Netherlands, they have that civil liberty. We don't. What's going on? Do we have to live our lives with this fear? In Norway, they don't have that fear. We have options. We lose, depending on how you count it, 20,000 people a year to handguns. 20,000 people. Germany loses 200 or 300. From a per capita point of view, we lose, I don't know, but 20, 30 times as many people per capita as a lot of countries do. That's something we accept. And we get all bummed out when a European is biking without a helmet. So we get very concerned about safety for people on bicycles, where we can't go downtown without taking a risk a European would never put up with when it comes to being a victim of gun violence.
When you hear, so I'm curious to sort of go back to the opportunities and challenges that travel places before us. First of all, have you had many challenging or even bad experiences while traveling? And how did that inform your perspective of travel?
I would say, other than a couple of instances of petty theft, nothing has ever gone wrong to me on the road.
Okay.
And of course, something went horribly wrong with you on the road. And,
Yeah.
If you have 12 million people going to Europe every year from the United States, a couple of them will have, just like Brittany Griner got arrested in the Soviet Union, right?
Right.
Well, that's a horrible thing. And it's a lesson for all of us. Don't travel around Russia with gummies. But does that mean travel is dangerous? Well, life is dangerous to a certain degree. And statistically, or comparatively, it's no more dangerous to travel than to stay home. I know that because I've spent 100 days a year in Europe every year since I was a teenager. And I know back when I started, people said bon voyage. And today people say have a safe trip. But by any statistical analysis, it is safer to travel now than it was back when people said bon voyage.
Sure. Do you think that then it's not true that, so one of the things that I say when people talk to me about studying abroad, for example, is I do concede that in a way you are more vulnerable when you are abroad because you don't have your social safety net around you the way that you normally would. And there are certain things about you that make you more vulnerable, like, say, you do not speak the language perfectly, or, there are lots of ways that you might find yourself less capable or less familiar. And that could lead you to be more vulnerable. Is there something to that? Or do you kind of like push back on that idea and say, all things being equal, it balances itself out?
First of all, I would say that's a selfish concern and that's not wrong, but it's totally selfish. What impact and what danger is it for you, unless you consider how does it make the world at large a better place? If there was no foreign study, the world would be a more dangerous place. The world would be a more fraught place. Why does Europe, even in the toughest economic times, fund its Erasmus program? Do you know about the Erasmus program?
Yes, my roommate was on the Erasmus program.
Which apparently funds students and teachers to study and work in other countries. Europe pays for that. And it's not because they just say, whoopee, we got money, let's go travel. It's an investment in stability and in countries working together and living together. And every time a study program to Turkey is canceled because American parents freak out because there was a bomb in Istanbul, they have denied all those hundreds of kids the opportunity to study in a pluralistic, Muslim, westward-facing nation that is an ally of ours and gives us a window onto the world of the struggling challenges of making Muslim countries part of the family of nations and pluralistic and separation of mosque and state, just like we try to have the separation of church and state. They deny all those students this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do that because they're overreacting to an isolated act of violence in a city of 20 million people. You know, in Istanbul, there's 20 million people. A bomb went off. So a whole program of students are denied the opportunity to learn there. That's just flat out illogical and overreaction to the news because they're staying home in a place that has far higher risk that those kids are going to encounter violence or some sort of danger. So I've got that attitude that we have to keep the risk in perspective. And when you stir the pot, you know, you encounter a little bit more and you live a little bit more. You know, you could design your life in a way where you encounter no risks. But I've never had any mishaps, Amanda, because I don't go to places that are dangerous for me. I'm well known as a traveler, but I don't go to places that a lot of people go to that, by my estimate, for me, I don't want to take that risk. I don't go to troubled countries in Africa. I don't go to places where there's a likelihood I'll come home with a terrible health problem, a disease. I'm a wimp that way. I'm chicken. But I'll go to Cuba, and I went with my TV crew to Iran. I'll go to Palestine. I won't go if the news is bad, but I'll go, you know, when times are stable, and I'll certainly go anywhere in Europe. I just really am aware that our country needs to get out and get to know the other 96% of humanity. And if you say you care about the ideals of America, and then you support a program that withdraws America behind walls under the slogan of Make America Great, you're making America small. When you defund the voice of America, what you've done is you've opened the world up to the voice of China in order to save $100 million. And that's just loopy. When you care about freedom and pluralism and capitalism and civil liberties and the economy of the world, and you pull away from the family of nations that's meeting in Paris or wherever, you've just advocated an opportunity for America to take a leadership role. And my European friends, they've seen 4 years of Trump before, and they may have squabbles with America, but when push comes to shove, they want America at the table. They appreciate American leadership. And if America wants those ideals to continue to resonate and inspire and shine on the hill, those great American ideals, which are more resilient than the policies of any particular American president, they're there, whether we like it or not. We need to be at the table and bolster those and lead the charge. And that will make America great. But right now we're making America small. And Europe is disheartened by that. But Europe is dealing with it. But when you're a traveler, I think you get a better sense of that. And you're less likely to be bamboozled by news media here into thinking otherwise.
Mm. So I began that question And I think it's so interesting that the way that you responded to it by sort of positing that the overall important thing is less the individual experience and more the social impact that an exchange of people has, and it benefits both us, here at home and also abroad. And yet, to that one person whose, daughter was murdered, or to that one person whose daughter ended up in prison, in a country where they had every expectation that they would be safe, I understand and I appreciate that perspective of, well, we shouldn't just think of these things as emblematic of the experience that most people are going to have. The vast majority of people who are going to study abroad in Italy or in Europe are not going to be murdered and are not going to be sent to prison for a crime they didn't commit. So we shouldn't over-respond, we shouldn't overreact and expect that anyone who's going to now go to Italy or go to Europe is going to have a bad experience. And that's something that I also try to talk about. But at the same time, I do think that there's something to this idea of, with openness to experience, with opening the door to serendipity, comes with it vulnerability. And I was wondering how you think about being vulnerable, or if you think, again, that that's more of an illusion, a comforting illusion that we are less vulnerable when we are here at home.
Well, it depends on what you mean by vulnerability. Are you talking about vulnerable to be changed, or vulnerable to be hurt?
To be hurt.
To be hurt.
To be hurt, yeah.
Yeah, well, vulnerability to be hurt is, do you really want to go skiing? You could die skiing much, much more likely than you could die on a foreign study program. Do you really want to drive on New Year's Eve? That's statistically, that's a dangerous time to drive. Do you really want to get on that bicycle? And you have to make that choice. I'm 70 years old. Do I really want to ski and risk damaging my ever more frail body? Much as I'd love to ski, I choose no, you see, because I've made that calculated decision. But I think when people say have a safe trip, I think they might not be talking about the physical danger. I think they might be talking about your self-assuredness as an ethnocentric American. And the danger is that you come home all messed up because you realize that we have our self-evident and God-given truths, but other people have different truths that are just as self-evident and just as God-given. And you're gonna complicate your life if you get out there and you see that Italians live better and produce and consume less. Because all we got to do here is produce and consume more. And you don't want to mess up your world by hanging out with people that actually take a siesta when they're hot and tired. Because that's subversive.
Right. It was shocking when I got there. I was like, what do you mean the grocery store isn't open?
What do you mean you're closed when it's peak season? You mean you went on vacation when everybody wants to go on vacation when you could stay home and work and make money? That's un-American, you see. And I find that, because I'm a typical American, I'm a great hardworking capitalist, but I find it very instructive to hang out in societies where people make decisions based on different priorities than we do here, dutifully as good citizens of the United States of America. So, you can inspire people to travel safely and not get into trouble. When I went to Egypt with my TV crew, I was worried about being kidnapped because they kidnap rich and famous people and hold them ransom. That was a risk I took because I wanted my countrymen to understand Egypt, so I dedicated 12 days of my life to film a TV show there. But I was high profile. That's one of the most dangerous things I've ever done, and I was nervous about it. And I
Did you
chose
talk
to,
about that on the show? Like your fear of being kidnapped?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because my show's not about a famous TV host and the stress that comes with being in a complicated country. My show is to teach Joe Sixpack what it's like to go to Cairo. And
It's a very complimentary nickname for Joe.
I'm not Joe Sixpack. And nobody's going to bother Joe Sixpack. But if you're standing there talking to a TV camera, that's a different experience. My TV show is all about accessibility and inspiring people to get out of their comfort zone and have a transformational travel experience. But the point is, I took that risk knowingly. That was that wasn't the safest place to go with a TV crew. And I could have done it if I wanted to do a personality-driven TV show. I could have made a big deal about what it's like to be with the police escort in a traffic jam, where you're in a van and there's a police car behind you with lights and siren blaring, and everybody knows that the rich and famous American is in this car, and there's no way to get out of there. I'm trapped. That was not very comfortable, and that would have been really interesting. But I'm not. That's not at all what I'm doing when I make a TV show for public television. I have a responsibility to bring home content that will equip and inspire Americans to get over there and broaden their perspective through travel. It's a beautiful challenge for us. So, I just want to stress, I'm not that. I don't take risks. I don't go to places that are dangerous. I go to places that people think might be dangerous. And then I travel in a way that's as safe as it can be. Is it perfectly safe? No. But compared to taking a road trip in the United States, is it reckless? No, you could make a case it's much more dangerous to take a road trip in the United States than to do what I've ever done overseas. I mean, statistically, there's no question about it. Europeans laugh out loud when they hear that Americans are staying home for safety reasons. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing how we overreact to dangers overseas when we consider what are the dangers that are part of our everyday lives here. Somebody was just killed up the street from us in Edmonds.
Wow.
And is anybody freaking out? No.
Because it's par for the course.
It's par for the course. I mean, it's amazing. I live in a very, very comfortable little corner of this country of ours. And it's just like page 3 news, somebody was killed. If that person was killed in Iceland, it would be a big scandal.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that if you never leave the place if you never leave your own backyard, the hazards of your own backyard become commonplace.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And you don't think about, removing that hive of bees over your garage door, because that's just being stung every time you go out the back door is par for the course.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's all about just basic, practical. How can I have a smooth, affordable, and experiential time in Europe? I just do Europe, and it's a big market. I'd like to write a book that tens of thousands of people will buy instead of hundreds will buy. I could write the best book in the world to Burma and it would sell in the hundreds. But I could write the best book in Paris, and there's 50 books on the shelf on Paris and sell 30,000. So, that's just a better market. I work real hard and I like to have people use that material. And then the idea is I want people to go into a Gothic cathedral and be blown away in a beautiful way.
Right.
And if they read my book and step into a Gothic cathedral, they could go, wow, this is the triumph of the High Middle Ages. What an amazing improvement over Romanesque. Those Gothic architects were just so brilliant. How did they do this? Embarking on a building project that was going to take 4 lifetimes. People dedicated their whole lives to building this thing, knowing they would never see it finished. It dominated the local economies, all for the glory of God. Oh, baby. Now, to step into a Gothic cathedral and understand the skeletal basis of Gothic architecture, why those windows mattered, and why Romanesque churches couldn't have big windows, and how people looked at the world before modern science and everything, when religion permeated their society, and how they dedicated their lives to this beautiful notion to get close to God. Whoa, I love it. And for me to just take that emotion that I'm sharing right now and help other travelers travel with that poetry or that spirituality or that wonder, that's my challenge, because a lot of Americans just want to see tired cultural cliches on stage and have a drink with other Americans and then go back to the hotel and complain about the air conditioning. And that's just a different kind of travel.
Can I ask about a new journey that you've embarked on, which is the journey of your health?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So what's going on?
I had cancer. I had prostate cancer. It was about a year ago today, I think I was diagnosed, a year ago this month. And I was just got a new doctor and I was all excited. I'm looking at my turning 70 and I'm feeling great and I'm more excited about life than ever. It was all about wellness. And a couple of days later, and he said, "Why don't you take a blood test?" I said, "Okay, good." And a couple of days later, he calls me up and says, "You've got PSA 55. If you know prostate cancer, that's like freakishly through the roof. It's very high, bad news."
Okay.
And he said, "You've got horrible prostate cancer according to the blood count thing." And all of a sudden I go, whoa. So we went from wellness to survival in a split second.
Yeah.
And then I had to, and I lived through this kind of twilight zone of not knowing what you're going to do, if you're going to get it, what's it going to mean for your future. But I was very, it was an interesting personal experience. And I was just honestly overwhelmed by thankfulness and appreciation and positive thoughts. And I said, I'm going to take this journey like a traveler, with curiosity, with a positive attitude, be a good patient. And I had I've got the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center. I've got a rock star of a surgeon. So I got a good ship. I've got a good captain. I got all these prayers and all these warm thoughts that are filling my sails. I mean, the prayers and warm thoughts took on a kind of tangibility, interestingly enough. And I sailed through the storm. And we decided to have a prostatectomy where they actually removed the prostate. And I wondered, is my little prostate like a rotten apple that looks good on the outside, but it's rotten in the core, which would be good news because they could take that out and all the rot would stay inside. Or was it like a ripe dandelion with missing spores?
Yeah.
And that's what I really worried. I didn't want it to have metastasized. And nobody knew until the surgery. And they did the surgery, took it out. A couple of days later, I'm back home and I'm waiting for the results. And then you go back 3 months later and you get a blood test and it looks like they got all the cancer. So I got every reason to think I'm cancer free and very thankful about that. But I've been public about it on my Facebook page and so on, sharing my journey, because I think it's important for people not to be shy about that and embarrassed about that, because there's all sorts of people dealing with scary health problems in secret. And I don't know why. So I just decided maybe I can be open about it myself and, use what celebrity I've got to let people know that it's not the C word. And you don't need to talk about it as a procedure. You can say, oh, yeah, prostate cancer. Yeah, I had prostate cancer. And I'm still dealing with incontinence or the sexual dysfunction or whatever. Talk about this stuff and normalize it. I think it's important to normalize these kind of things. And I've had a lot of people thank me for that. I'm sure it saved lives because people are older men who should get tested, should be tested. And then maybe you can nip it in the bud. And we've got such great medical technology now that we should be very thankful. I wouldn't be here, I don't think, now if it wasn't for that. And why on earth our government is defunding this kind of stuff, it's a whole different interview. But I'm a recipient of that. And most of the people you see walking around are recipients of a lot of the fruits of smart and enlightened investment in medical technology. And simple-minded people are quick to complain about stuff. But boy, I see it as something to be thankful for.
Did you discover anything new about yourself on this journey?
I was reminded about how fragile our health is. And I was also reminded of how blessed and privileged I am to be able to handle that with no financial stress. When for a lot of people it would be ruinous what I went through. And when I was walking down the hallways at the hospital down there when I was, getting my surgery and treatment, I could have felt sorry for myself, but I realized that many, many people on that hallway looked at me and wished they had my problem. So it made me see things in perspective and to be thankful and to be positive and to use my life in a good stewardship kind of way when I get out of this. And I like to think that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Something that you talk about reminds me, do you know Kristen and Ville? They're this couple who travel the world. Famously, she wrote a book called Joyride about their bike ride from the top of Alaska to the bottom of Argentina. It was a 2-year journey. Anyway, I interviewed them for the podcast. And one of the things they also are huge, advocates for travel and specifically, travel the long way around, the hard way around, not just to get in touch with nature, but to get in touch with people. And they have this perspective of sort of being shocked by how generous people are in places that are a lot less wealthy than we are in our country. And I was wondering if you had a similar perspective. You've traveled in and primarily talk about traveling in also affluent societies. You talk about Norway, you talk about Scandinavia, you talk about Germany. These are places that are pretty affluent. Do you find that there is a similar generosity of spirit or like a communal caretaking that happens?
Well, in Scandinavian countries with a high standard of community, you have that. We're all in this together and we take care of each other. That's the opposite, frankly, of the United States of America. It's capitalist. Some people are going to not have enough and some people have too much. And they're the job makers and maybe it'll trickle down. I mean, forgive me for being political about that, but I've traveled enough to know that there's a certain irony. When I'm in Latin America, I'm overwhelmed by the spirit of abundance. People that have almost nothing have. And when I'm in the United States, I'm astounded at the spirit of scarcity, a mindset of scarcity that we have when we have, if anything, too much as a society. And I just think there's a sort of a sad irony there. And I'm reminded when I'm in Central America that this sort of sensibility that we're all together. It's sort of like when you think of, I love this idea of love thy neighbor. And love thy neighbor is not unique to Christian theology.
Sure.
I think every great religion has this notion of love your neighbor. Well, if you believe in God, whether it's however you think of God, but if you believe in some kind of a God, whether it's organized religion or not, we are all children of that heavenly creator. And that means we are all brothers and sisters. When you travel, you get to know the family. And if you believe in God and you know that we're all children of God and you believe in love thy neighbor, there's nothing. Proximity has nothing to do with love your neighbor. Suffering and need across the street is no more real than suffering and need across the sea. And joy is no more beautiful across the street than joy across the sea. That's a Christian, if you're talking to Christians, that's a Christian point of view without any doubt that joy and suffering across the sea is just as real as joy and suffering across the street. We're all children of God. Well, that is something that should be, our political decisions should be seen through that lens, if that's who we think we are. And if you want to see it through another lens, diametrically opposed to the whole notion of love your neighbor, don't call yourself a Christian. It's just not, it makes no sense at all. And that's a consequence of traveling for me. And when I go down to Central America, I see people embattled by corrupt and brutal governments in societies where there's no middle class. There's just desperately poor, landless people and big plantations and big corporations in cahoots with their big government. And I see these people living on, plantation wages, scrimping and saving. And you visit them and you're a gift from God. And if they've got a chicken available, they'll serve the chicken tonight because you're with them. And they are just living life with a beautiful spirit of abundance. And then when you come home, like I was just talking about on the phone when we started our conversation that people listening didn't hear, but I was talking to somebody about how we're scrimping and saving to help fund music in our public schools in this community. And it's our government has a mindset of scarcity, and there's not enough money for music. So local heroes have to just pick up the slack. There's a mindset of scarcity, and south of the border, there's a mindset of abundance. And if anybody should have a mindset of abundance, it should be the most abundant country in the world.
Why don't we?
Why don't we? I don't want to be judgmental, so I'm not going to say. But if we call ourselves a Christian nation and we're ignoring hunger in our midst, and we're defunding things that will make a huge difference south of the border. I wrote I produced a 1-hour TV show called Hunger and Hope, Lessons Learned in Ethiopia and Guatemala, because all my life I've been concerned about what I consider structural poverty, and how can there be hunger in such an affluent world? And it's structural. I learned in this show that 10% of humanity is trying to make it on $2 a day. That's extreme poverty. And I learned that we can make a huge difference in that. And we did until this last couple of months with our support of USAID, which empowered the World Food Program of the United Nations, which brought vital aid to the communities that I witnessed in Guatemala and Ethiopia. But I learned that if you want to make that happen to the American electorate, you don't talk about love your neighbor. You don't talk about the ethics of that, of feeding hungry people in your midst. You talk about how this is a practical investment in making America safe. That's the only rationale. And we don't make any bones about it in our government. The Republicans primarily say you cannot have loving policies to help desperately poor people south of the border unless it can be framed as something that is serving America's needs, America's interests. So what I proposed in my TV show, which anybody can watch anytime for free on the PBS Passport app or on my website at ricksteves.com, along with every other TV show I've ever produced. But what I've presented is, yeah, sure, if you love your neighbor, this is a good way to do that, to feed hungry people south. But forget that idealistic nonsense. Let's talk about pragmatic, make our country safer by creating a more stable world. That's how you have to present it for it to be viable in the political arena of the United States of America right now. It has to be presented as a pragmatic investment in American security.
As self-interest.
Self-interest. And then the love your neighbor stuff is just an accidental twofer. And I'm sad about that, but I think that's a practical approach that you have to make. So I've long been a key supporter of Bread for the World, which is a lobby organization in Washington, D.C. that speaks up for hungry people. And I've been advocating there as a insider at Bread for the World that we have to frame this in a practical, America-serving way if we're going to get this legislation, because it just doesn't float if it's just simply loving your neighbor. It's got to be a practical investment in American stability.
Is that an expression of fear, or is that just once more an expression of scarcity? Like, what is that an expression of?
Greed and fear. Greed and fear. And when you travel, I think you become less fearful. And you realize the humanity of this planet. And at the same time, honestly, Amanda, if it had nothing to do with love your neighbor, and if it was just for stability, I'd be an advocate proponent of that, and that's a beautiful thing. Our defense budget, we spend $1 trillion a year essentially on that, $1,000 billion. It's supposed to make us safer. That's why it's the defense budget. Good. But I think we should assess every one of those $100 billion spent. Is this the best investment in that taxpayer revenue to make us safer? And that's all hard power. And we're at a point where we've got so much hard power, and now we've zeroed out soft power. And I believe soft power is a practical investment in making us safer that needs to be funded just from a practical point of view. It makes us, the X dollars dedicated to soft power makes us safer than that incremental X dollars that is now going into hard power. What is the value of Voice of America for soft power, to spread the ideals and appreciation of what America is all about? Is it worth $100 million a year, 1/10 of $1 billion? No, it's not, apparently. So we zero that out, and suddenly Voice of America becomes Voice of China. Not suddenly, but in the next few years, there will be a Voice of America counterpart, and it is going to be the Voice of China. And that was a very poor decision if you want to make America safe and great. And that's the kind of foolishness that we are incurring right now as a great nation, and we're going to pay the price for a long time to come. I want to make America safe. I want to make America have an impact on the world. I want to make America great in the sense of furthering the ideals that we celebrate and embrace as Americans. I'm a big one on that. And by withdrawing from the world and zeroing out all of our soft power by destroying USAID, because that's what soft power is, working on the brand of America, we make America smaller. I know from my experience, because I'm into marketing, in Germany, marketing comes and goes with American flavor. Sometimes it's all the Beach Boys and Fun in the Sun and Americana. And then a couple years later, things have changed and they comb everything that smells like America out of their advertising because that doesn't sell. Sometimes the brand of America is high. Sometimes the brand of America is low. Right now, there's not a hint of the Beach Boys in European marketing because the brand of America is toxic and you will never sell anything with a Beach Boy ditty in Germany.
I love that as a gauge of how safe we are in the world. Are they playing the Beach Boys? Thank you so much, Rick, for this very widespread and interesting conversation. I really appreciate you.
It's a delight to talk to you, Amanda, and best wishes with your work, with your message, and with your travels.
Thank you.
Happy travels.